Welcome to my presentation for HIS 3001 Topics in the History of Trinidad and Tobago 1783 to 1898. Project 1, a biography on Sir Thomas Picton. We begin with his biographical information. He was born with the name Thomas Picton, the seventh child out of 12 children for Thomas Picton and Cecil Neil Powell. His name was given as a result of his older brother's death, whose name was originally Thomas. He died Lieutenant-General Sir Thomas Picton. According to Fraser, Thomas Picton, the future hero of the peninsula, was born at Picton in the county of Pembroke in August 1758. McCallum stated he was born of obscure parents somewhere in the mountains of South Wales. Through further research, his birthplace was located at 22 Hill Street, Haverfordwest, Wales, on the 24th of August 1758. His early life. He was commissioned in 1771 as an ensign in the 12th Regiment, then commanded by his uncle, but did not see active service until the capture of St. Lucia in 1796, Johnston. During this period under his uncle, he would learn the languages of Spanish and French. Thomas Picton entered into the 12th Regiment in 1773, which was stationed at Gibraltar until becoming a captain in 1778. Years following, the regiment would be disbanded and Picton would spend a few years living on his father's estate until he volunteered for service in the West Indies and was assigned to Sir John Vaughan I and later to Sir Ralph Abercrombie in 1795. His times in the West Indies. Picton headed to the West Indies, and under Sir Ralph Abercrombie he participated in the capture of St. Lucia, where he got promoted to lieutenant colonel. Following this capture of St. Lucia came the invasion of Trinidad on February 1797, where Abercrombie took control over the island after Don Jose Maria Chacon surrendered. 1797, Sir Ralph Abercrombie arrives in Trinidad and captures the island. 18th of February, Articles of Capitulation are signed, and Thomas Picton is appointed military governor, Brereton et al. Picton was chosen as governor over the island due to his ability to speak fluent Spanish and French to a certain extent. He was, however, skilled in the Spanish language and was therefore capable of conversing with such persons as he convinced most qualified for giving him correct and useful information, Draper 34. He was told by Abercrombie to run the colony under the Spanish laws. He would be the sole governor of Trinidad until a three-man commission in 1802. Afterwards, he would be arrested in December 1803 by the Privy Council and returned back to Great Britain. During this time in Trinidad, Picton was rumored to have 4 children with his mistress, Rosetta Smith. After Trinidad, he returned to Britain to face the trials involving the torture of Luisa Calderon and other charges which resulted in him being guilty. But in 1808 he filed for retrials and all his charges were eventually dropped. Picton would go on to fight in the Peninsular War, where later on in the Battle of Waterloo on the 18th of June 1815 he would die charging into battle. His cause of death was a serious musket ball wound to the hip. He was 56 years of age. After the battle, his body was returned back to Britain and buried at St. George, Hanover Square, and later his body was moved to St. Paul Cathedral on the 8th of June 1859. Analysis of Sir Thomas Picton's contribution to the development of Trinidad. Early years, establishment of his system of governance. Articles of Capitulation signed during Picton's early years of being governor. He sought to turn Trinidad into a profitable colony This was accomplished through taxation. Among the first things that attracted his attention was the vendure office, which yielded monthly $500, if not more. Gambling houses, of which there are many, afforded considerable gain. Every billiard table paid and now pays $16 Macmillan. He placed a new council or cabildo mostly consisting of French planters. The council goal was to grow Trinidad into a profitable plantation colony, mainly run on the work of slaves. Picton was heavily influenced by these planters, some such as Brereton, which led him into his tyrannical ideology. Spanish laws would be continued until a solution was found for Trinidad. He was reassured that punishment and torture was acceptable. He ignored British regulation and disregarded British superiors. The simplest way of dealing with this new governor was to make him one of them. Planters therefore took advantage of his lack of social power and gubernatorial inexperience and exploited his isolation. Candlin. Defense. Picton was still in fear of a Spanish invade. Trinidad was also filled with pirates and criminals, and to combat the people he ruled with an iron fist, stating, "Let them hate so long as they fear," and with the people describing him as a man who neither spared a man in his rage nor a woman in his lust. The British was only 1/6 of the population during the early period of his governorship, making the country filled with Spanish and French planters and colonizers. Another source of constant anxiety to the governor was the well-known desire of the Spanish government to regain possession of the colony. Fraser. Taken from Lieutenant Colonel Mosheim letters, Trinidad in the year 1798 and 1799, periods the most critical, during which your vigilance, activity, and wise measures preserved that valuable colony. Robinson. Picton created a naval force for border patrol. Picton set about organizing his own naval force to patrol the coastal waters. Its functions included protecting merchant shipping, disrupting enemy trade, coastal raiding, and keeping the insurgents from the mainland making landings along Trinidad's shoreline. Heilman. He extended the army with locals. Picton had available, on paper, 1,000 troops of questionable quality and reliability. At any one time, only half of these men were available for duty due to illness. To supply this force, Picton raised a local militia comprising mainly white planters to deal with internal security problems, and also enlisted various individuals to carry out intelligence gathering duties. Soon, nothing would take place on the island that he did not hear about quickly. Heilman. He set up a poison commission led by Brereton to solve how slaves were being poisoned on plantations. Other means of development under his governorship. Picton also expanded on trade and encouraged more immigration thanks to improved security of the colony. The impulse given to trade off the island by the wonderful success of the cellular of 1783 had, of course, been felt in every branch of industry. Fraser. Settlers, British, began to now crowd the island. Macmillan. Plantation development. Picton became a slave owner with his own plantation. He began to promote the slave trade in Trinidad legally and illegally in regards to acquiring slaves. Sir Thomas Picton maintained the system and issued new and stringent regulation for the administration of quarters, particularly tightening up on the relative freedom of slaves. As far as agricultural production was concerned, the system seemed to have worked efficiently, and in 1811, Anthony. Towns, forts, ports, roads, infrastructures have improved. Fort Picton, a fort built in the administration of Sir Thomas Picton and situated on the hills of Laventille to the east of Port of Spain. The roads which when the English became masters of the island were almost impassable, had gained the reputation of being the best in the West Indies, and communication was being extended throughout the colony in every direction. Fraser. Later contributions. More development. The colony began to flourish, population growth, more estates, new establishment. Planters had strict laws to follow and higher taxes to pay. More trade. From 1784 to 1797, the average yearly tonnage had been between 7 and 8,000 tons, whilst in 1802, only 5 years later, it was 15,000 tons. Fraser. More money in the colony. In short, everything that was capable of being made lucrative, he turned it to his advantage, so that the first year of his governorship yielded more than £15,000, most of which sum, however, I am well informed, was obtained by oppression and peculation. Macmillan. His tyrant leadership. There were many instances of cruel punishment, no trials, his tyrannical rule over the colony. There were no true representation for the colony. The first instance of torture was in the barrack yard upon the soldiers. General Picton once said to the gaoler, "Go and fetch the black man off the picket guard, and put him to the torture." This was the first instance of the use of torture in Trinidad that I was acquainted with. A councilman named Raphael Shandu. Slaves and free-colored were oppressed under his reign. He established a strict slave code in the 1800s. Picton new laws were promulgated that restricted free-colored movement or assembly, or curtailed officer advancement in the military. Interactions between those of mixed race and whites were discouraged. Free-coloreds had to carry a lighted torch at night, were restricted in their socializing, and their military ranks were stripped from them. Free-coloreds were a fear in the plantation colony due to the French Revolution, as they could have been seen as ones who could have thrown it over. Rosetta Smith, Picton mistress. She was promised governess by Picton and was another prominent figure into influencing him. Almost from the moment Picton arrived, there were connections made between him and Rosetta Smith. Candlin. Picton took upon Rosetta Smith, whose influence in the colony was extensive and with whom many believe he was bewitched. He silenced newspapers and walked over town folks. Picton abused his power to remain dominant, often blacklisting people in the colony to show his power, and would often imprison them. He tortured and hunted people, even silencing the Trinidad Gazette. He treated his own British subjects poorly. His prisons. To remain dominant, he created prisons to hold slaves and people who disregarded him, which included local soldiers and British immigrants. The prison of Port of Spain, with its picket, irons, and slaves chained to hardboards, constituted a classic Gothic space of darkness and horror, transporting contemporaries to a remote place ruled by an equally distant past, Epstein. Port of Spain's steamy jail had long served as a correction center for the flogging, branding, ear clipping, and stalking out slaves, Havard. More of his tyrannical behavior and punishments. He was ruthless, often no trials, and choices were made by his sole judgment. Picton met the problems he faced on the social front with equal ruthlessness. A free African woman alleged that some royal engineers had raped her shortly after the occupation. With little investigation, The governor hanged one and gave 1,500 lashes to the others. According to several eyewitnesses, he had screamed at the condemned man, "You are going to hell with lies in your mouth." Another, a mulatto man, got drunk and allegedly abused a woman in her parlor. Perhaps more controversial, he too was sent to the gallows without trial. Candlin. He ordered 35 executions, most in his first year, when the gallows of Port of Spain's waterfront were decorated with corpses. Picton greeted immigrants at the dock by pointing at the ghoulish figures who had fallen foul of his penal system, Havard, when he became one of three. On March the 25th, 1802, Trinidad is officially ceded to Britain by the Treaty of Amiens. A commission of three is created to combat Picton tyrant ways. William Fullarton, first commissioner, Picton second, and Samuel Hood third. The British government to substitute 3 commissioners for the former military governor Picton. This immediately led to a struggle between Picton and the first of the 3 commissioners, Fullarton. Williams. Evidence of his tyrant rule was coming out. When Picton's replacement, William Fullarton, visited the jailhouse in January 1803, there were still several slaves chained up, many close to death and in near delirium. Trinidad became a major slave colony. Thousands of human cattle toiled on increasingly larger and more sophisticated estates, changing the demography of the colony and the nature of its society. Picton chose to become like all the members of his council, a major planter with a shared need for fresh slaves to stock his new plantation, Candlin. The case of Luisa Calderon at the end of Picton in his rule in Trinidad. The picket was a short wooden stake positioned on the floor so that once hauled above it, the only part of a victim's weight that could find any relief or balance was the big toe, which just rested on the point of the picket. This would be bad enough, but the delivery wasn't detailed. The other limbs were also tied up, placing the individual in an excruciating stress position. Valot fixed the rope through the pulley in the roof. Chando, the guard, then held Luisa aloft as the jailer tied her left foot to her right wrist behind her back. Then, using the other end of the rope, Valot hauled her up. Conclusion. Picton was a man of no royal or upper-class background. He was chosen for governor due to his skill of communication of Spanish, French, and English, which was comprised of the planters during his beginning as governor in the colony. He used it to turn the colony into a profitable situation. Trinidad became his playground where no power was more grand than his. Picton governorship contributed to the development of Trinidad into a profitable plantation colony, but it was fueled by slavery, corruption, and his tyrannical rule. Many argue that his rule was necessary, while others differ, but his impact marked and laid the setting stones for Trinidad history and development. Sir Thomas Picton had a unique position in history with a series of different views on him, largely due to his heroic death, which he is often remembered now for, being the hero of Wales, but he is not forgotten as the tyrant of Trinidad, a man who abused, tortured, and controlled the people of Trinidad during his reign.